It's not broken, it's just a crack. Now this is an interesting topic. The words we use with our patients, whether they're medical or non-medical even, have a certain connotation with that patient in spite of what it might mean to us. So for us, we might say, you've broken your bone, thinking that sounds very common language and expecting that's not going to freak someone out. And in truth, a fracture and a broken bone or a crack in a bone or whatever of them natures is all the same thing. There are different types of fracture or different types of broken bones, and there are different severities of this as well. And yet we aren't mentioning them things, we're just using the word. And these words can have an impact on people's behavior. So if you use a certain word that's negatively connotated, then they may actually become fearful and not do the thing that you want them to do. And likewise, if you give them a word which doesn't seem to give them enough kind of protection almost around that kind of word, then they might go and do too much as well. So the words we choose are actually important, but the problem we've got is we don't really know what people perceive these words as being. Is in this broken bone scenario, is a fracture being more the medical term? Is that more of a negative word in the sense that people are fearful of that word? Or is a broken bone worse? Or is a crack in a bone worse, or whatever? And that's what we're going to look at here, is a study looking at just this subject area. So in this study, they were looking at what people's perception of the word used meant to them. So they were looking in this case at fractures, broken bones, and they were basically looking to see what the person believed was going to happen because of the word used. So were they expecting an invasive intervention? Were they going to have surgery or something more drastic based on the word used? Not the severity of that problem, but just the word to describe that problem as a whole. And this is what they found. If they were told they had a broken bone, then they expected a more invasive intervention in 58% of cases, which is really high. Now, if we said the word fracture, this dropped actually to 42%. Now, this surprises me because I would expect, being the medical term, fracture, I would expect that would be a little bit more of a fear factor. But I suppose when people think of a fracture, maybe they visualize a smaller break, perhaps. But this isn't true. Fracture is the medical word for a broken bone. So they should have the same connotation, but they don't have the same connotation in this essence. Now, if they were told green stick fracture, which is what happens in young people who have got still soft bones and bones that are developing, instead of having a break that's sort of more of a clean break, they tend to get this sort of fraying of the bone, which is a bit like a green stick, like a young twig which has got a lot of sap in it. It doesn't snap like a dry one. It kind of breaks and frays, and that's a green stick fracture, which happens in kids, as I said. And when this term was used, they actually found that the connotation for needing more invasive intervention was actually 28%. And for a hairline fracture, it was 26%. Now, of all these things, the last term they used was basically saying a crack in your bone. And when they said you've got a crack in your bone, which basically is the same as a broken bone or a fracture or any of them things, it was even lower still at 19%. So if you say to someone, you've just got a crack in your bone, then they might think, oh, it's nothing to worry about. Or on the flip side, you say you've got a broken bone, they are scared to death and think they're going to need some amazing crazy surgery, when in fact they might just need a boot, or they might need a plaster of Paris. Nothing extreme in the intervention. And it shows you these words have a consequence, and we have to be careful in terms of the person we're dealing with. If we've got someone who suffers with anxiety and stress, then we want to be careful using the word broken bone in this context. And if we've got someone who's totally gung-ho, sports person, wants to just crack on, wants to carry on regardless, then we've got to be careful being too much on you've got a crack in the bone. And this does happen. You think, surely they're not going to do too much on it. I've seen a guy once, he had a stress fracture in his tibia. He was a runner. He came in first session and said, I've got a stress fracture in my tibia. I was like, "How do you know?" He was like, "I've had it before." And I said, "How long ago was it? And what did you do about it?" And basically, he didn't really let it recover as the problem and went back to running too soon, which is a common problem in sports people. So anyway, I'm there thinking, well, when was the last time you ran? Thinking when it started hurting again. And I asked him the question and he said, "This morning." And I said, well, okay, well, you can't really do that with this type of problem. And, basically I was expecting him to, listen to his body because he's got a fracture. And obviously he must have a different connotation to this problem. Perhaps he is more of the, oh, it's nothing major, when in truth, it could turn into something more major in terms of, well, and it is, it's going to stop him from running because the pain's going to get worse. But he didn't see it that way and was still running on what he knew was a stress fracture in his tibia. So this shows you that, certain people react different ways, and we've got to be careful of the fear-avoidance behaviour that developed from too much fear planted into that word. And likewise, the gung-ho nature of people sometimes in other contexts, we've got to be careful there too. But it's very interesting that the same medical problem can be connotated from all the way up to like nearly 60% thinking, oh my God, it's going to need something drastic, all the way down to as low as 19% where it's needing something drastic. So this shows you that there's quite a variance in people's beliefs behind certain words we use. And obviously we don't necessarily know until we see research like this. So it's really, really interesting to see. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.